you can share yours if you want,
Okay.
Nathan. And so I give you Nathan Wood, who has been a strong supporter of this program. He comes every periodically, and it's just a great perspective on unfolding or unwrapping what it means to work with a recruiter when we're looking for a job. So, Nathan, thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate coming to listen. I think this might be my fifth time here, over at least 5 or 6 years, and I always enjoy this, and I always walk away learning. I mean, I take things I hear in here, and share with others that are in the job search process. So I first, I really appreciate this time, and um, and always have a good time. And usually it ends up being somewhat interactive. So feel free, if you have a question or a thought, or you disagree with something, put it out there, because again, I kind of feed off the questions, and I try to really make this my slide deck, or you say extremely simple and bare bones, because I don't really know where we might go. Every time I come, we'll kind of sometimes focus on something different. So, and just a real quick about me, I have I think I'm going on 11 years now of recruiting experience, and as you probably know, recruiters usually will have some yes and no, but a niche or a specialty. And mine is in banking and financial services, primarily with smaller banks, community banks. And how I fell into that was I started my career in real estate, commercial real estate, and moved to Florida right when the market crashed. So I was 2008 and slugged it out for a while, but I essentially was, in a very tough job search. So the reason I was fortunate enough to kind of fall into recruiting after that. But the point of that is although I haven't walked in any of your shoes, I have been in my own form of searching in a tough market. And so I know, again, I haven't walked in your shoes, but I know how hard it is and how lonely it can be sometimes, and how just sometimes hopeless it can feel. Especially too, when with social media, you go on LinkedIn, sometimes it looks like everybody's getting a job, and, so-and-so has a new job, and it can just be very sometimes challenging. So just put that on the table. It is this can be I don't know where you'd rank it, but it's one of those things. I think when you're in a transition, or even very underemployed, it's one of those things in life that's really tough. So I really appreciate this group, and I think to echo you, it's very important to walk with others, and make sure you're talking about this with people who you trust. So, my experience and my background is clearly from a recruiter side. So I know little bits of HR, I know little bits of the legal side and tips, but my primary experience is as a recruiter. So that's what I'm going to share, and we can divest into other areas, or divert. But first off, let's see, why is this not changing? I know not everyone may have worked with a recruiter. That's not. So, and some of this might be very, very elementary, because I assume some of you have probably worked with recruiters before. If you're in HR, have worked with or hired recruiters to search for you. But just very, very simply, how I work, how I get paid is, companies such as small banks will hire me to go find people that are hard to find, and or maybe that they will, and that's their strategy, because maybe their HR department is very small, or they don't have internal recruiters, or even if they do have internal recruiters, it might be a position that's just extremely hard to fill. So my job as a recruiter is essentially just professional, constant networking. I am constantly networking within my banking community. Some recruiters might have a specific geography. Some may be more expansive. Most of my work is in Middle Tennessee, but I do work in Atlanta, and because there's just not enough small banks in Middle Tennessee that would support my work. So that is my job. And sometimes I'd say, be more reactive. A bank says, this is who we need, and please go find them. And sometimes I'll be more proactive. If I met you and you're a certain kind of banker, I'm like, oh, I know that there's a few of my banks really are always looking, so I might be proactive and send it out to the banks. So it's not always a very linear process, but I'm just very simply just always networking and really just trying to make sure I'm talking to everyone and know, I'm in tune with my network. So, and again, I'm sure some of you have had experiences with recruiters. I will say, I mean, it's like any industry. I would imagine you're going to run into good ones. You're going to run into not so good ones. I know that there's a lot of recruiters out there that they say, you're just a number, and they're not very responsive. And I'd say all those, I'm sure, are very true, unfortunately. So I'll just put that out there too, that when you work with recruiters, you may have good experiences, you may have poor experiences. I would just recommend that if you've had a poor experience, and I'm going to be kind of bouncing all over the place, but one of the best ways to find a recruiter in your industry that would be a good fit for you is through someone referring them. If you can ask someone, have you ever worked with a recruiter? Did you have someone good that you would recommend? That sort of thing. Because in my world, I will get candidates often that were referred to me from someone I've placed or someone I've not placed or worked with. So maybe that's jumping around a little bit, but that's a good place to start. So the next thing I was going to talk about is kind of the process. What does a recruiter need, or what are they going to ask for? But before I go into that, does anybody have any questions so far?
So another name for would another name for a recruiter be a headhunter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Some people say, "Oh, you're a headhunter," and some people are offended by that. I'm not. I mean, that's just that it's maybe old school, but at least I know they know what they're like. Yes, that's what I do. So yeah.
And so, how do you find recruiters in the field that you're looking at?
Good question. So the best I would say would be referral. If you can ask friends. So are you in IT? So there's lots of IT recruiters out there. Lots. So that would be one where, because some industries, I think it's like there's some like manufacturing distribution where there are recruiters, but they're less. Or I've had people, maybe there's architectural design. There are recruiters less. There's probably the most in IT, I would imagine, because it's just an industry that uses recruiters often. So I would first, in that industry, I'd probably be asking friends if they knew somebody, or if our old colleagues, or within your network, if you've had a good experience with a recruiter, because you won't have to look very hard to find an IT recruiter. Or, maybe there's someone that's been consistently dropping you messages in the past who you thought was professional, or, I'll have some people reach out to me or respond to me. I mean, a year or two after they'll never respond. And it doesn't hurt my feelings, because it just means they don't need me then. But I will have people reach out and say, hey, you've always been messaging me in the past, or I see your roles coming around, maybe it's time for us to talk because my bank's being bought, or something like that. So, but that's, and I'm sure there's other ways. I mean, you can do research, but each company has, yeah.
I think LinkedIn.
Well, so Georgia comes back every so often and said, you suggest LinkedIn.
Yeah. And it did kind of I know I'm going to jump all over the place. LinkedIn, and that's spoiler, is probably what I was probably going to address this later, but LinkedIn is really where, unless I just have someone already on the list, that's where I'm going to do most of my searches for candidates. Just to make sure within my own network that I have, or recruiters have this program called LinkedIn Recruiter, which allows us to message directly. We can search by geography, title, and that's where we see the, if someone clicks, I'm open to new opportunities. So it's something that's very helpful, at least for me. I mean, I will message everybody, but if I see someone's open to a new opportunity, and I'm probably going to hit them first, because at least I know they're probably going to be checking and looking. And sometimes in the open new opportunity, you can even put your preferences, what you're kind of open to. And sometimes I think you might have to be a little thoughtful what you do there, because I know there's some candidates, and I'll usually message them anyway, but if I'm looking for, let's say, like a mid-level role, they might have, I'm open to, it's all real high-level stuff, but they might still be open to mid-level. So I would just say, if you're open to a lot of different things, then put a lot of different, I mean, maybe not so much that you're going to like confuse, but maybe a few different levels if you are open to more than one thing. And I know this question comes up every time about the green swoosh. That sound familiar? There's this green thing where it says open to work on your picture. You seen that? Everybody asks me, they say, is that good or bad? Is that, it's very, very clear, but does it make me look desperate? And my take is, I think if you're open, it's not going to stop me from reaching out to someone, or I'm not going to feel a stigma about it. But I will also say, just be careful, because it's been the target of scammers, from what I understood. So, and I'm not exactly sure, I can't really speak to what all the scams are or what you have to look for, but just be careful. I would say, another thing too is, unless it's some very, very high level executive search function where they're called like reverse recruiters, and they have this, they'll help you write a resume, they will proactively market you. There's some of those that carry a cost, but just, I would say, for your just traditional recruiters, it shouldn't cost anything out of pocket up front. So just be, careful. Now, resume writing is different, but I mean, just, for an application, or just be cautious, because unfortunately in the market like this, the scammers are out there. So,
well, typically they will pounce, meaning as soon as you switch it, instantly you will get so give it some time. If you do that, give it some time, because they will instantly pounce. And they're fake. So yeah.
Is there anything that, other than that just instant, is there anything you've seen that's, whether their profile, I've seen some have like no connections hardly, or just, it almost looks fake. Is there anything that everybody should look out for?
Just the communication is staggered, and it's, it's really not that cohesive of thought. You can kind of tell when it's someone actually typing or not. I put a lot of thought into punctuation, even when I'm doing things fast, and I'm, typically if it's either too fast or if it's not good, then it could be someone, English is not their first choice of language, you know what I mean? So you can kind of find those things out that way.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you.
I'm just thinking too, if it's coming from outside the country, because sometimes Americans get targeted in a situation like this, you might notice, like you're talking about, gaps in grammar, spelling, punctuation, or if it's a fake bot or something, it, like you said, might not be a cohesive thought. So just pay attention. If it doesn't sound right, then maybe give it some time. Plus, if you're talking about something outside the country, we might be 12 hours off. It depends,
When they respond.
Yeah, when they respond.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. With AI, it's going to continue to get more and more prevalent and realistic, I imagine.
Yeah. I was just discussing with friends the idea of ads and famous people, and then realizing that they're basically just copied the person. They're making an ad with them, and I don't know how at this point these are surviving, but they are at this point. So you just have to be alert, be cautious. And if you're not sure, maybe ask a friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Any more questions before I move on?
Anybody online? Anybody online have any questions? No?
Okay. And again, some of this is going to be very no-brainer, but I never know. Some folks have never worked with recruiters. So what will a recruiter need? What will I typically ask for? Of course, a resume. Sometimes people ask me, should I send you 2 resumes? You know, I have a lengthy one and I have a very concise one-pager, and I'll usually say, if you have both of them, I'll take both of them. Usually what I will use, and I'll talk to them about this and get their opinion first, I'll usually use the more simple version with a client and then let them know that I have a more comprehensive one if they want to see it. But usually I find simpler is better. Even if you've had a really long career, again, I'm not a resume writer, but just with the clients I interact with, everybody tends to be overwhelmed with a lot of information. References, I would say everybody's different. I ask candidates to be, go ahead and start thinking about it. It all depends on what stage we're in the process. Now, if they're an active candidate, if they already are working, it may be a little different. I'll say, go ahead and be thinking about it. But also, I think it's also very fair if you're working with multiple recruiters to say, hey, I've got references, but I'd like to wait until, we get further in process. Some recruiters will just call references, and if you're working with 3 or 4 recruiters, it might wear them out. So, you don't have to let the recruiters call your references up front. But if you are thinking about references just for your own good in the future or your own search, usually I say if you've got at least 1 or 2 managers from a previous role would be ideal. That's what sometimes the hiring managers want to talk to. And then maybe a peer or someone who's worked for you. I will say, I don't know if this is a trend with HR, but I'm having less and less clients ask or require references. I don't know if it's becoming less important, but be that as may, some still will. So,
In my experience, I have not had to use references, I don't think, in more recent jobs. And I think it's more that the experience speaks for itself and that they can verify that perhaps more easily. I'm not sure.
Or they have predictive metrics that they use, or that they have predictive metrics that they use otherwise to predict better employee selection and things like that.
Yeah. And I will say too, if you're within a niche or a small geography like Nashville, a lot of times people are calling people that they know you, and you might not always know it sometimes, but sometimes a lot of the placements I've made, I didn't even know it, but somebody knew somebody else and said, yeah, they're great or whatever. So I don't know if at that point references aren't as relevant.
And I think that's where networking can come into play, because you might meet somebody that knows somebody, like you were saying, and that's sort of like a de facto reference, I guess, even though you wouldn't necessarily call them that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It makes my heart happy when I present a candidate or I talk to a candidate, we've got a role, and they say, oh, you know what? That role looks great, and I know someone there. And I'm like, well, as soon as I share this with the hiring manager, will you call them and see if they will walk over and sing your praises? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Because sometimes, I know a lot of people in different companies, and maybe the connections, I thought it was stronger than it really was. But I know we're going to come around and around networking, but it really is. Your network will usually help you get your next job, whether it's directly or indirectly. But that has been a big part of a lot of my placements or either that, or the client will say, hey, I know someone who's worked with you. Do you mind if I call them and talk to them about you?
So I have one more question then.
Yeah.
You mentioned LinkedIn, and you see people with 500 connections, 1,000 connections, and all that. I guess that would still be considered your network if they know that you're looking, right?
Yes. Of course, the less you know them, the less likely they may engage or go to bat for you. But it can't hurt to have a it really can't hurt to have a big network because you might put out there that you're looking or something and somebody might like it or say something. So it really can't hurt to have a huge LinkedIn network. But I think the real magic happens is when you have a coffee with someone or a lunch, or maybe it's just someone LinkedIn that they'll do a Teams call with you or something. It's like, hey, I'm out there looking. Would you mind catching up? So I think the more human connection you can make with your network, the more likely. And it's not always, I think, just a thing out of like kindness. It's I think when you have a one-on-one situation with someone where they're not distracted. I know just me personally, when I sit down to have a coffee with someone and we're talking about their search and what they've done, and I'm not in front of my computer or I'm not out there, when all the distractions going on, I have ideas and I'll just go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't think about this company or this contact that might be able to help you. So, I know networking, but the more people you can have that, and it doesn't have to be, a lot of people, we think networking's like these really awkward, cheesy events where it's like speed dating. It doesn't have to be that. It literally, to me, it's like catching up with old friends. If you can get a friend, have a lunch or a coffee, or even you can find a recruiter and just say, do you mind if I buy you a coffee, or we get a coffee together, and just literally just talk ideas. I've had so many ideas with a candidate going back and forth where it's like, if I didn't sit down to have a coffee with them or maybe a phone call, whatever we could do, I wouldn't have known. I didn't really, just scanning a resume, having a quick call sometimes. There's an aspect about their background or what they're looking for that I didn't know until we had a coffee or lunch. And then it's like, oh, it opened up. I had one with someone the other day and they said that they'd been traveling back and forth to South Florida because they know someone down there. I was like, well, that really opens it up. I'm glad you told me that because we can now look at South Florida as an option. So, yeah, definitely the working the network is huge. I'd say I won't say a pet peeve, but one thing that's tough is when I talk to a candidate and I say, so what are you looking for? Like, what should I look for, or what should I listen for when I'm out in the market to make me think of you? And I'm not blaming them for this because I've been there, but sometimes they'll say, I'll look at anything. And although that may be true, it's really hard for me. And I believe you have a
Personal marketing brief.
Yep. So that is awesome because the more, you don't have to be extremely specific, but the more intelligence you can give me about what you like or what you don't like or what you're really looking for, it really helps me or your network, whether it's a recruiter or just a friend. And I did. One time I remember telling a friend, I said, I was looking, and he said, well, what are you looking for? I said, real estate. And he said, well, you got to tell me like what, because what he was saying is I want to introduce you to like 2 or 3 of my friends, but I need to know I need to be able to tell them what you're looking for. So that credibility, the credibility statement you're putting together or the target is really, really good. Mm-hmm. It's a great exercise. In fact, I need to share that with the candidates I work with too, just to help them. And I think when you probably go through the process, you probably learn a little bit about yourself too. It's like,
it's one of the really big benefits.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it helps with your elevator pitch, which is on your list here.
Yeah.
To find who am I and what am I really looking for?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good process. And even though it's a really tough time of life, if you're going to be making a pivot or you're kind of in this journey of self-discovery or where God's leading you, I think it is a blessing in a way of you've got some time of self-introspection to kind of, and sometimes, in my case, God needed to get my attention and calm me down and slow me down so he could pivot me to the next step. So anyway, but that's great. That will help whether it's a recruiter or just your network, the more clear you can be about what you want And you can, of course, say, but please keep me in mind if it's within, these general area of IT, if you want to be open about it. So, salary range, a lot of people ask, should I tell a recruiter my salary range or what I'm looking for? I personally leave that up to the candidate. I have some that tell me they'd rather not tell me, and that's fine. I have others that give me every last detail of what they were making last, and that's fine too. So I think that's just going to be a personal preference. You can tell your recruiter, listen, I want you to please consider me for anything from 40,000 to 100,000, and they probably, will. But I also have some that say, listen, I need to be at here, and it's kind of a personal thing because talking about your finances, it's uncomfortable.
And that's the difference between an internal and an external recruiter too.
Yeah. Yes.
Internals, you wouldn't say that or not try to divulge to the last. Like externals, you want them to kind of get you in the ballpark of,
Right.
Yeah.
And for an external like me, so we're usually there's might be some unscrupulous people out there, but if you trust your recruiter, usually they're just trying to figure out what's a fit, and they want to make a deal. I mean, we're not trying to,
it's a percentage of
right
what you make. So the more, if it's an external, you make more.
That's right.
They make more.
That our interests are aligned, and that's and just so everyone can kind of understand, if it's a little confusing. What's the difference between an internal and an external
So my internal recruiter is going to be someone that works for the company, X company. An external recruiter is someone whose job is to find people in a particular industry as you are.
Yes.
Externally to try to get them into fit, and that's how they make their money.
Yes.
Yes. So,
and coming from HR, do you think there's I have my thought. To me, I think the interview or the conversation with the external can be sometimes a little more casual.
correct. Yeah.
Would you agree that?
Yes.
Because I think when you're talking, you have to be, I think, a little more thoughtful of the internal because, for instance, someone talking to me might say how bad they hated the last company and how much the boss was a jerk and everything. I want to help them get placed as long as I don't think they're like a problem or they're a sociopath or anything. I get it. Like we've all had those things, but I feel like it's a safer place at external where we can be like laugh about it, but you're not going to say that on an interview, right? Like, oh no, don't worry. And then we'll kind of talk through that, like, well, I understand your boss did this, or they were, but how can we? We'll probably work through some scenarios, and you can ask your recruiter always, like, how do you think I should phrase this? And usually, if they're experienced, they'll be able to probably counsel you pretty well on how you address things in a professional manner, where it doesn't look like you're trashing your old company or, So the point is, with an internal, I don't think you want to have those kind of conversations. I think you want to. Would you agree with that?
Yes, because there's typically a budget and they want to get the best bang for their buck.
Yeah.
And their economic thoughts are different.
Yes. Yeah. It's a different mindset too, because they may see those things as red flags and not move you forward in the process. So, and usually if you're having a conversation with a recruiter, I love it. I love it when a candidate will ask me, what do you think about that? Or could we role play this a little better? How should I address my job gap? Or, I hate to say this, but, if they're concerned about ageism, how should I address that? Usually a recruiter will be able to help give you not only their thoughts on overall, but their thoughts with that specific, if they've got you engaged with a specific company. Now, sometimes it might be their first role with that company and they're learning as they go. But ideally, your recruiter should be able to tell you, hey, this is what this company likes. This is their hot buttons. This is their culture. This is, and help you then make a decision whether you'd want to, be there or not. But Anyway, so that's off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I'll pause there for a second. Any questions?
So my question is about salary, and you may be able to answer this just as easily as Nathan. I've been lowballing myself a little bit. Is that a red flag? Because I don't require a lot of income right now, and my experiences in the fields I've been applying for are somewhat limited because none of my titles really necessarily express how much experience I have. So the one job I applied for, I think this morning or yesterday, that I forgot that the job actually listed 65,000 as their yearly income. And when I got to what salary are you requiring, I only put 50,000. Is that going to be a problem? Is that a good sign? I mean, I guess for internal, that'd probably be good, but also is it not?
It depends on who you were talking to and how they interpret it. You know, someone might see as a red flag, oh, she didn't read the document, or they may say, she's probably a little bit nervous, we're kind of close, no big deal. It just depends on the person you're talking to.
And if they see too much of a discrepancy between that and what, then they might say, well, oh, they're not going to be happy here. It's going to be too much of a difference or something. Right. Everyone has their own personal bias. All recruiters will have their personal bias. External recruiters typically that's why they're different, but internal recruiters, they can have their own way of seeing things. You're never going to find a right accurate question or answer.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I see the concern. I mean, some could say, I guess, there could be a thought of why is she below where we want? Is she not as experienced, or but I don't know. But I would say if you feel qualified for it, I don't think there would be an issue with putting what it was posted. But I'm sure you're okay. So yeah.
This is kind of usually we're on the opposite side of this thing, but
right.
If you are applying for a position and you are worth what you have the qualifications for it, when it comes to the money, I would say take it, save it, max out every option you've got, because all of us that aren't independently wealthy at this point, we're getting older and you may need it someday for whatever reason. So there's a lot of tools now, especially to be able to do that. So, and then you could still, which is a great position to be in, to be able to live on less than what you make. Yeah.
I've also noticed that there's a website called Glassdoor that definitely will help you understand what the salary range, if it's not totally clear what's being posted.
Yes.
How often are the recruiters sticking to that salary range or whatever?
When it comes to
what we'd see online.
And I would ask, is that information really legitimate?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Right. I mean, because there's no magic crystal ball to collecting that information and saying this is the range. I mean, it could differ based on job description. It could differ based on job title, regions. Yes. I mean, be very careful about anything online being gospel.
Yeah.
Unless you're Bible Gateway, then you're pretty close to gospel. But seriously, I mean, things like Glassdoor, it's just a very broad categorization. Okay, bye.
You're welcome.
So just be very careful in using that stuff.
I will say too, I have not been the biggest adopter of AI so far, but I have found with some AI, whether it's ChatGPT, you can be extremely specific, and I've been shocked at some of the answers that have come out that I would say are very accurate about, what our salary range at this company or, this type of, it is more specific you can be. And that's not always correct. You have to be careful, but to your point, yes, you can't Glassdoor those. They will give, it's just not always accurate. Now, if you're working with a recruiter, of course, you can ask them, what is the salary? And sometimes they will know. And sometimes, unfortunately, the client will want to keep it open, and then becomes this back and forth of, well, what are you, but that's where I think the research can really help too. I mean, the recruiter should be able to give you an idea of, hey, what do you think? Like, you're in this space. I mean, if I'm in the banking world here in Nashville, I should really be able to tell you a good idea of where it should be and whether this client's usually on the lower end or upper end. And if they're the lower, there should be a reason maybe why. If got one client's a nonprofit kind of bank, and they're always going to be a little on the lower end. So, but I think we have more resources than we've ever had with AI and different things to at least get a sense of where things, should be.
Actually, doesn't the Department of Labor have salary survey information?
Again, it's not,
And not as-
it's so such, anything that goes for broad categorization and across a large sample size there's a lot of interpretation. Whereas what Nathan said, if you can drill down, what does Tractor Supply pay? Right? And if they happen to have, if the database has some specific information, that's going to be probably one of your best sources of information about this company.
Yeah, because it's all, at least in, I think my world, but I imagine this would be in everything. A lot of it comes down to what you're actually doing, but also the size of the organization. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, whether it's public or not. I mean, there's so many different factors that play into it. So it's really hard. And that's why I think all comes back to some of these Glassdoor. You really have to take them with a grain of salt because you just don't really know.
Well, the reason why sometimes people go to Glassdoor too is because they're angry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's kind of like you're just getting the bad reviews usually.
How valid is that data? Right. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it's
I just something that somebody might want to look at depending on what industry they're in around salary is that a lot of professional organizations do salary surveys. And I've seen some that are very detailed and break it down into regions. So like the Southeast, the Northeast, etc. And I've also I go on like Indeed or LinkedIn and look for similar jobs in Nashville and what those are paying. And that kind of helps me figure out what salary range might be for a job. But it's sometimes I'll just ask them what their range is. And if they don't give me one, then I'll just say, well, I've done some research and some salary surveys, and here's the range that I am seeing. Does that sound reasonable to you? And try to get a conversation going so that I don't have to commit to a figure. I don't know if that's helpful for anyone, or as a recruiter, is that a bad approach?
No, I love that. Because it's not saying this is what I need or what I want, but this is what I've seen. And then that should elicit a response from the recruiter, where they're going to probably say that's either, well, that's going to be high for this or low. So and to your point, yes, each trade industry usually has their own salary survey. And some of them, I will say, even very, very detailed, can be kind of off because it's really tough. But yes, that's a great resource.
So Society of Human Resource Management typically has, they do one. It's usually done by local chapters sometimes, and it feeds into like the national model. But you as a general person in the industry, unless you're a member of like SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management, at like the head level, you don't get that data. So I know a lot of people in compensation work do that. Now I can share a trick that I've learned, that there are some things when it comes to like certain states require job postings to have that salary range in them. And Tennessee does not require that, but states like California and Colorado do, I believe. If you have a VPN setting to reset your VPN to be within that state, let's say, for example, Denver, Colorado, you can see that stuff right on LinkedIn. So just want to put that out there.
Nice.
Hey, this is George.
Okay. Just so in
10, 15 minutes.
Okay. No, I'm going to skip the next one. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No worries. I just wanted to add that yeah, I guess I've been lucky because I even when I'm asked in an interview, it's usually the first like
Mm.
HR person, like I want to get it out of the way. Um with the first person I talk to, but they ask me my range and I immediately say, "What's your range for this role?" And like 95% of the time, they will go ahead and tell me what their range is before I have to give them a number, which is helpful because
Yes.
I don't want to go too high if they're lower. So I've been
Or too
lucky.
low.
And then I'll say my range is somewhere around their high to a little bit higher.
No,
And
I like that. There's no advantage to going first if you can. And some are going to be sticklers, but
Yeah.
you know, it really isn't. It's like who speaks first loses, right? You might as well. But so it doesn't always work that way. But I love that approach because why not ask them first?
Mhm.
Because it may be higher than you thought it was. I'm going to skip to the next one since we're getting a little short on time. I just put a bunch of stuff in here that seems to come up when we have these conversations. The networking, I know we've talked about that a little bit, but I always, just to come back to it, it's so important. I can't tell you how many candidates I talk to that feel awful because they apply to 20, 10, 20 jobs a day. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, you should, but the probabilities sometimes when you're competing with so many different people and you really don't even know who's checking these, if they're checking them, it's literally like a black hole sometimes. So you have to apply, but your network is really where the power is. And also too, if you're going to apply, again, we have so much information now, whether it's, you could put into ChatGPT and say, who at this company do you think would manage this role? Or you can just find them on LinkedIn, usually. Sometimes even on LinkedIn, I think it tells you who the hiring manager is. And in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with connecting with them. And if they do connect, you might even tell them, hey, I just want to let you know, no pressure, but I applied for this job. I'd be more than happy. I feel like I'm a good fit. I'd love to work for your company. Let me know if you have any questions about, I've known so many candidates that have done that and had an interview request through that when their application wasn't even seen, because it's usually just not personal, the application. It's not even a rejection. It's just that somebody just went out we've got people that using AI to make their resumes more like, and it's inundating things. So, feel free, or if this might be common sense, but if you see a job and you apply for it, check to see who else you might know at the company. You might know someone there who can vouch for you or try to get you in the door. So again, it all comes back to networking, maybe being a little more assertive, pushing, just really, really going beyond what everybody else is necessarily doing, because it can be kind of, I feel, this sort of downward trap of you apply for 10 jobs, I hear nothing, I feel worse about it. I apply and it's just not a personal thing. There's just so many applications out there right now. So that's why I've seen just the most success from my vantage point through the personal networking and the connections with other people who help open doors for you.
One question to ask is there a downside to being bold?
I don't think so.
All they can do is say no.
Right. Yeah. You have nothing to lose.
Yeah. What's that saying? You miss 100% of the things you don't try.
Yes.
So yeah, be bold.
Especially if it's one where it's like, this is right, right up my alley. Like I can do this. Overqualified, I know that's a big challenge. And again, it's not usually personal. I mean, it is personal in a way, but usually I like to break down to what's the fear. Like why are they worried about it? You being HR, I'm sure usually the concern is if you take that, they give you that job, as soon as you find something else that's the pay you used to have or the title you used to have, you're out. So you're kind of a flight risk. So I don't know if there's a perfect way to overcome that, but Jay said something here one time, and I thought was a great way to move through that, is you really make it more about the company than just getting the job or the role. So if you can express real interest in that company and make a case for, this is the company I want to work for. I know this is a bit of a step back in my career, but however you want to frame it, whatever, I'm patient, and I don't mind taking the time to work my way back up, but I want to be at this company. I think that can help overcome that. And sometimes, I've had candidates placed that were managerial before, and they honestly said, like, I do not care to manage anymore. I just want to be an individual contributor, and sometimes that lands, and sometimes it doesn't. But I think that's a legitimate posture as well. Job gaps. Sometimes there's not much you can do about that, but I've had many people that maybe you did some consulting then, and you can put your consulting company in there. I don't know if this makes a big difference. I've heard many people say, name it something different than your name, just so it looks like, I don't know if that makes a huge difference, but those little tricks people do. I think we kind of talked about this earlier, but if you were, I'll say fired, but if it was a negative situation when you left your last job, that might be one of the first questions you get. Or, I'll put it this way. If you've had some jumps, or you were let go from your last, or there was just a gap from your last job, that's, whether they say it or not, that is on the mind of who's interviewing you. It is going to be on their mind and a concern. And I don't know if this is gospel, but I had one manager tell me he likes it when a candidate just kind of addresses it up front, say, hey, I'm sure you're curious about this, and then you address it, but you don't want to hang out on there for too long. I've had some candidates that were very understandably nervous about something that they thought was going to be perceived as negative, whether it was a gap or being overqualified or whatever it is, and they kind of just kept explaining it, over-explaining it, and it just sort of took the interview in a not the best way. So again, there's no one way. I just tell people, just don't make it as big of a deal as it needs to be. Address it. If it was a bad company, bad situation, you could just say it wasn't a great long-term fit. It was a great learning experience. You're ready to take all that and apply it to the next one. Just keep it as positive as possible is what I tell people. The ageism part, I know I get a lot of people ask me, how far back should I go on my resume? Should I, and yes, I think it's good to be brief, and if your first 10 years of experience isn't really relevant right now, then maybe you don't need that on the resume. Some companies are going to be like that and some aren't. It's hard to tell. And I think this might go back to the overqualified, but one great way to kind of keep things rolling and stay in the game is if you've been out of work for a little while and you're very heavily qualified, that's usually, or overqualified, that's usually perfectly fine, if not desired for contract work. So maybe there's an interim contract work, not always easy to find depending on your industry, but if you know people, maybe you can ask around to see if there's any temporary contract interim work that might help you get your foot in the door and really just keep things going. It's income. You still meeting a lot of people. You keep the network growing. When you have a job, even if it's contract, it's always easier to find a job. And you can keep looking the whole time you're on a contract. And sometimes if they're like, wow, we don't want to lose them, then they'll make you permanent because they know you're looking. So that's really about all I had. And I was a little all over the place, but are there any questions?
Sorry about that.
Okay.
My last question would probably be is when you're doing the interview and you're asking about when benefits take effect, I know for me, that's important because right now I'm without health insurance.
Yeah.
So is that a taboo to ask about that ahead of time, or is that something, so you don't see any issue with that?
No.
Because sometimes they call me about contracting jobs and I tell them, well, I really need benefits. And then that ends it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just totally understandable if you need benefits and the contract job doesn't offer that. Because some do, sometimes they're not as good or they kick in later, I've seen. But like I hate to say it, it's a lot of staffing companies that hire people as contractors and put them on contract. Their benefits are usually subpar, but they're something sometimes. I don't think so. I think I'm just trying to think if someone was interested in a job I had and they said, hey, do you know what the benefits are like? I might not, but sometimes I have them. If I worked with a client for a while, I'll just send them the package, or at least you can give them an idea of what the benefits like. Some, HR, everyone's different. Some of them don't disclose their benefits until you're further along the process, but you can at least tell, hey, it's Blue Cross and they're good, or they're, in some companies, there's some pay for your premium. So the recruiter should probably know a little bit, and certainly if they have an interview with, if you're interviewing with a hiring manager, they might not know much of the details, but if it's an internal recruiter, they should be able to give you, because that's their world, they should be able to give you really good details on at least that first interview with. But a recruiter should kind of know up front when they kick in, if there's benefits. Of course, if it's a full-time direct hire, it should be.
And typically, if you're going to be hourly or salary, if you're going to be typically like salary, then those typically start like day one. If you're hourly, it may take 90 days. There might be a 90-day.
In my experience too is, and not always, but a lot of times if it's a contract work, you should be getting paid more hourly, because in some ways I've had a lot of people say, I'm going to need this because I'm going to have to compensate for, I'm going to have to get my own insurance. So it's going to need to be. So generally, I would usually, the hourly rate's going to be higher on a contract work because there's not benefits, because it's, interim. It's not, they're not taking on the burden of benefits and all that. So sometimes it can even out. So
I've even worked for the same, like I worked for Kelly once, and first time I worked for Kelly, insurance was not great. Then I worked for Kelly Engineering, and that was amazing insurance. So it all depends on the type of people they're wanting to seek, and if they're looking for someone within maybe a tech background, then they might try to recruit more heavily with that type of incentive.
Any questions online? Nope. All right. Nathan, thank you so very much. Good.
My pleasure.
Appreciate having you back again. We are not here next week. We shall see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
So